Alright, so right now you don't see anything, okay? But when I place the QR code, yeah, so you see the 3D object, okay? So what we did initially, we placed the 3D object in thin air without the QR code. Later we modified the code so that it is triggered only when it sees the QR code. QR code, you can either print it and put it on table, or you can use it in on your monitor screen. But in this case, since the QR code is sort of vertical, the screen is vertical, initially the 3D model stands perpendicular to the screen, so it is looking downwards. So we rotated it 90 degrees back so that even when it sees the QR code, it stands parallel to the QR code and not vertically. Okay, so we made those changes. All right, so now we will do something more. Let me close this. So today we will add some basic UI buttons so that we can rotate the object on clicking those buttons. Okay, so it looks somewhat like this. You see these right and left arrow buttons, so on clicking them the object will rotate. Okay, so this is what we will do. All right, so first, to do that, you need to add something called button canvas. So for that you need to go to in project folder assets, AR marker, prefabs, and then UI. Okay, and drag this button canvas into the hierarchy. Okay, and it will ask you to import something. You just click import TMP essentials. Okay, no need of importing these examples, you can close it. So it will add a canvas kind of thing to your scene. So okay, so it is basically adding whatever buttons you saw in the video. Those are the 4 buttons here. Okay, it looks quite big, but it basically fits onto your screen. Okay, so don't worry about that. All right, now come here, click on button canvas, expand it, and click on button 1 and button 2. So here in the game view you can see how it's going to look. Okay, so here you can actually change the aspect ratio. Like, since I am testing it on iPad, I have selected iPad Pro, but if you are testing on iPhone, you can select iPhone, whatever is your model, and you can select portrait mode or landscape mode. Like, if it is portrait mode, it looks like this. If it is landscape mode, it looks like this, and so on. Okay, so since I am using iPad, I selected iPad landscape mode. Okay, so you can change your aspect ratio based on your device. Fine. Now now rename these 2 buttons. So this is button 1, button 2, button 3, and button 4. We will just focus on these 2 buttons. Okay, so this button we will rename it to, say, button rotate left. Okay, and this one we will rename to button rotate right. Okay, and then in each of these buttons, in the text, you expand each of these buttons. In button rotate left, you will find the text field. Okay, so come down. So here, instead of the word button, use left arrow Okay, so this is what you will see. And similarly in the button rotate right, instead of this use right arrow. So here you may not see this result immediately. That seems to be like a bug in Unity. So once click play and then stop, then you will see it. Okay, so yeah, now you see. So left arrow and right arrow in the buttons, and bottom two buttons are just named buttons. We will not touch them. Okay. All right. Now, so now we just created the UI. We didn't still give any action or trigger to these buttons, logic to these buttons. Like when you click this button, what will happen? When you click this button, what will happen? We have to do that, right? Okay. So for that, we will use something called visual scripting. Okay. So you saw normal regular scripting, C# script, but we can also do a lot of things using visual scripting. So you will see what visual scripting is. So for that, first in the hierarchy, right click and create an empty game object and name it visual scripts. Okay. Now when you are on this object itself, in the inspector panel, click on add component and here type script machine. Okay. All right. And then click on new. So new graph, it's asking you to create a new graph. So within assets, within AR marker, you create a new folder called visual scripts. Okay. And this graph name it rotate object. Okay, I'll explain again. So first right click in the hierarchy, create empty, okay, and name that object visual scripts. When you are on that object, click on add component and start typing script machine. Then you will get a basic graph object, and then you should click on new. It will ask you to select, or let me show it again. Script machine. Here you should click on new and it will ask you to select the folder. Then within assets, within AR marker, you create a folder called visual scripts. In that visual scripts folder, you name the file as rotate object. Okay. So once you do that, you will get this. So let me remove this. Okay. So you will get this. You give some default title and summary. So title is say rotate object and summary is it rotates the AR object using the UI buttons. Okay. So that's AR object, right? The 3D model which we are going to get, we are going to rotate that using UI buttons. All right. Now click on edit graph. Okay, this you may see because our Unity version is different. So all you need to do is just quit Unity and restart again. So let me just save it, quit it. And restart again. Okay, so visual scripts, this is gone. Okay, object rotates the AR object using the UI buttons. Okay, edit graph. Yeah, so you get an interface. Okay, so here, so whatever logic you usually write in a script, that same logic you represent as a graph. Okay, so this is called visual scripting. So first let's remove these two nodes. Okay, and then so initially what we need to do, we need to add some variables. So these variables, so like any script will have variables, here in graph we will have some variables, some nodes. these nodes will be used by multiple graphs related to this game object. Okay, so first let's create a variable called button rotate left. Okay, and it's asking for its type, so its type is button. Let's search for button. Yeah, so its type is button. Okay, and then what should be its value? So button rotate left, this game object. So this variable is associated with the game object button rotate left. Okay, in the hierarchy, if you remember, there were 4 buttons. Button 1 we renamed to button rotate left, button 2 we renamed to button rotate right, and so on. So that game object is associated with this variable. Okay, so this variable's value is a game object. Fine. All right, now similarly button rotate right, and its type is button, and its value is this specific game object button rotate right. Okay, and then we will create another variable called model object. So this is for the 3D object. Okay, and its type is game object, right? And we need to assign the 3D object to this variable. The whatever 3D object we are going to display, that 3D object will be assigned to this variable. So for that, let me resize this. Okay, so this one, so this we will drag here. Okay, okay, so this 3D object we are associating with this variable, this particular variable. So now we have 3 variables, that is for the left button, for the right button, and for the 3D object. Okay, left button variable is of type button, and it is associated with the button rotate left game object. Right button is also a button, it is rotated with the rotate right button game object, and then model object is a type game object, and it is associated with the 3D object. Okay, so now we need to create the logic. Okay, so this graph we will create now. Using these objects, we will create a Visual Script graph. So first, right click on the graph editor and add on button click node. Okay, and then create another node okay. Now, so how you create that node? You just drag this button rotate left onto the graph. Okay, so now connect these two. Okay, and then you create another node called transform rotate. So in transform rotate, you need to select X, Y, Z angle. Okay, and make Y angle 15. That is, every time you click the left button, the image or the 3D object rotates by 15 degrees. Okay, and connect this button click and this transform rotate node. Fine. Then drag this model object onto this graph and connect this with the transform rotate node. Okay, so basically what this is saying is, when you click this button rotate left, you need to rotate this particular model object. So imagine this is like a function. Okay, so this function takes an input of on which object should I act. So one input is this object, and by how many degrees should I rotate. So another input is these three coordinates, now these three values, x, y, z values. Okay, and when is this function called? When this button is clicked. Okay, so since this is of type button, when you click it, it triggers this function call, and this function call takes an input which object I need to rotate and by how much I need to rotate. Okay, so now we can test it. So let's go back to Unity, and in the last class we disabled this 3D object, because if you don't disable it, it will spawn even without the QR code. Okay, so what we did, we disabled it and we made it spawn only when we saw the QR code. Right now, since we are testing on Unity itself, we will enable it again just to see how it will work. Okay, so the moment you switch on the camera, this object will come even before it sees the QR code. Okay, but we want to test whether it will rotate or not on clicking the button. So let me run it. Okay, so now I click. Okay, it's rotating along y-axis, but what I want to do, I want this object to rotate on its feet. Okay, so right now it is rotating along y-axis because initially it was standing, but we made it fall flat. Okay, so we need to change the axis. Now it should not rotate along y-axis, but what is this axis that is perpendicular to the screen? Yeah, z-axis. It's not x. X is right. This is x, this is y, and this is z. Okay, this is perpendicular to the screen, so it should rotate like this. So it should rotate along the z-axis. All right. So I'll just change this. So first let me stop this. Where is it gone? Okay, so in the Visual Script, I need to make this 0 and this one 15. Okay, now let's test it. Okay, you see, now it is rotating along z-axis. Okay, and you see here on the right side, you see there is a value that is coming up here. It is recognizing that this 3D object, I need to act upon this 3D object. Okay, so this 3D object name is John Lemon, and you see this particular edge got the name John Lemon. So let me see if I can reduce this. But this will be gone. Okay, yeah. So here, when I click this, you see this value. So the data is being passed between these nodes. You see? Okay, so that is what is happening. So this object is rotating every time I click. Fine. All right. So let me stop this. All right. So now same thing we need to do for the right button as well. Right now we did only for the left button. We need to do the same thing for the right button as well. It's quite simple. All you need to do is select all these nodes and click on Control D or Command D depending on Windows or Mac. So this will be copied. Just drag this below, and here instead of button rotate left, you select button rotate right. Okay, and then instead of rotating plus 15, it should rotate minus 15. It should rotate in the opposite direction. Okay, fine. Now let's test it again. This one, okay. Okay, so when I click the left button, this edge will be activated, right? In this graph, this is related to the left button, the bottom one is related to the right button. Okay, so when I click on left button, this left button graph is activated, and you see the image is, the 3D object is rotating. Okay, similarly when I click on the right button, this below graph will be activated. Fine, because input is being passed between these nodes, you see, and it is rotating right. Fine. Okay, so both the buttons are working now. Now we can actually test it. All right. So suppose I run it. Takes so much time. Yeah. Okay, now it is immediately showing the object because we enabled it in Unity. We were not waiting for the QR code. Okay, so now when I click on it, say if I right click, it rotates right. If I left click, it rotates left. Okay, now suppose I bring in the QR code, right? I did not disable that, so that will also trigger or spawn a new 3D object. Okay, you see, now it spawned a new 3D object. Fine, but will this object also rotate if I click? No, this object is not rotating. Only the default object is rotating. So this object is not affected by these UI buttons. Fine, as you can see, the object behind, only that is rotating. Fine. So what we want the triggered object to rotate. Okay. So how to do that? That's what we will see now. Okay. So as of now, the triggered object is not rotating, only the default object is rotating. Okay. So to detect the triggered object and to act upon the triggered object, we need to use something called tags. Like we can tag different objects with some tags. So what we say is, so what we will do is, we will act only when we see a tag. Okay, we will act only upon those objects when we see the tag. So we will write another visual script such that it will keep looking for the tag, and when it sees the tag, it will allow this rotate script to work on that. Okay, so for that, so first let's disable this. Okay, and then in the project window, go to prefabs and double click on your prefab. Okay, so this is our prefab. So double click on that. Fine. And here you, on the right side, here below the name, there is something called, okay, let me go to scene view. Yeah. So here in the inspector, on the right side below the name, there is a field called tag. It is right now untagged. Go to the bottom and click on add tag. All right. And here click on the plus button and type model object. So we are giving it a tag called model object. Okay. So only when we see this tag, we will make it rotate. Only the objects which have this tag, they will rotate. All right. Okay. Now we just created this tag. Fine. But we need to apply this tag for this particular mesh object. Okay. Because whatever you apply for the topmost parent, that will be overridden when you click play. Okay. So only that which you apply to the immediate child, the first child, that will remain for its instances as well. Okay. So now select this John Lemon mesh, and on the right side in the inspector, select this model object tag. Okay. So now this is for the prefab, this is for the mesh. Now every instance that you create, that will have this tag. Okay. So go back. Okay. Now okay, so now let's create a new visual script that calls the rotate script only when it sees the tag. Okay. So let's go to Visual Scripts. So all the variables that you created earlier, they are visible here. The rotate left button, rotate right button, and the model object, those are visible here. Okay. So, but before that, we need to create another visual script. So again, you need to type script machine. Okay. And click on new graph. Then again in AR marker, in visual scripts folder, you create a new graph called say setup, and here in the title write setup, and here you say initializes variables. Okay. So basically what we do is we will not initialize the model object variable right now, but when you click the play button or when you run your app, it will look for the objects with the tag model object and assigns that 3D object to that variable called model object. Right now what we did, this model object variable, we already assigned a value to it. We are saying this particular model object should be assigned to this variable. But later what we will do, we will not assign it anything beforehand. We will let it detect that object automatically based on its tag. So that's what we will do. Fine. Now let's click on edit graph. Okay. So here, let me put it on the left. Click on the object tab. Okay. And let us remove this value, this variable's value. Let us make it none. We don't want to give it beforehand what object to detect. We want it to detect only those objects which have the tag model object. Okay. So we will make it none. Fine. So right now it does not have any value. Fine. Now we will create a small visual script that finds the game object with the specific tag. Okay. So first let's delete this start node. Okay. So on update, so first let's add another node that says find game object with tag. Okay. So there are two things that you find here, one singular and another plural. Select the singular one, find game object with tag. Okay. And what is the tag that we are looking for? Model object. Okay. So type that tag name in the tag field here. All right. And then connect this node with this node. Fine. And then yeah. So now once we find the object with this particular tag, the 3D object with this particular tag, now we will set this variable with this value. Okay. So now we add another node. So let me move this a little left. Move these to left. So now we will add another node, set object variable node. Okay. And this we will set its value to model object, and for that we need to connect this node with this one and this edge as well. So what it will do, first it will look for 3D objects with the tag model object. Okay. So once it finds that, whatever object it finds, so in this case there is John Lemon object with the tag model object, then it will set this variable with John Lemon. If it finds, say, another 3D object with the tag model object, it will set this variable with that 3D object. Okay, so that is what this does. And once it sets these values, the rotate script will anyway run. The rotate buttons will act on this particular 3D object, not any 3D object, but only the 3D object with that tag. Okay, so that is what will happen. Fine. So now let's run it and see. So you will understand. So since we disabled this will not come by default. Only when you show the QR code, the 3D object will come and the rotate buttons will act on that 3D object only. Okay, so let us see. Okay, so right now no 3D object has come because we disabled it in Unity. So let's put it here. Now let's see if this rotates. Okay, yeah, it's rotating but on the wrong axis, but we'll just correct that. So it is working. At least these buttons are working on the triggered object. Okay, earlier they were not working on the triggered object, they were working only on the default object. So right now, since this object has the tag model object, it is working on this. These buttons are working on this object. Okay, so that's what we wanted. So all we need to do is what do we say? So let me close this. So here, why is it rotating along z-axis? Because here this z-axis is local z-axis. So in the prefabs, this local object, what do we say? This, you see this mesh axis and, sorry, you see this parent axis and this child axis, both are different. Fine. Earlier we were applying on the parent axis, but now for the child axis, this is y axis, that is what do we say? It is, the local axis is proper only. Okay, for the parent axis, the standing axis is y axis and the light flat or laid down axis is z axis. But in this case, the laid down axis itself is y axis. So when we go to the Visual script, where is that? Let's go back. Let's come here and in the rotate graph. Okay, so here earlier we were working on the parent, so we had to use z-axis, but now we have applied the tag to the mesh object, so we need to use that mesh object axis. That mesh object axis is, the y-axis is aligning with the body, so we need to apply rotation along the y-axis itself, not z-axis or x-axis. Okay, so let me make this 0, make this 15, and similarly this one minus 15 and this one 0. Okay, now let's test it. Okay, so now let's hope it will rotate. Yeah, you see, this is how we want it to rotate. Earlier it was rotating like this, but we wanted to rotate along its feet. So that's all.
So, is there any easier way to understand the axis system? That is very confusing.
All you need to understand is global axis versus local axis. So when there is a parent and there are children, the children's axis are with respect to the parent's reference frame. Okay, but when there is a parent, its axis is with respect to the global reference frame. So this is, with more examples you will understand it better. Okay, all right, so yeah, so that's what I wanted to cover today. So what all did we do? Initially we added, initially say we came to projects folder, assets, AR marker, and then prefabs, and then UI, and we dragged this button canvas into the hierarchy. The moment you drag this button canvas into the hierarchy, you get this canvas kind of a thing. So this is where the buttons are laid on your screen. And then we went to each button. We went to these first two buttons. It was button 1, button 2. We renamed them to button rotate left, button rotate right. And then we also changed the text of left button and right button. Let me show it in game view. And here you could change your aspect ratio. You select whatever screen you have, and you select either portrait mode or landscape mode. Just to, before you test on your actual device, it will look how it's going to look. You can see in your simulator. Okay. And here we change the left button text to less than symbol, and the right button text to greater than symbol. Okay, so this is what we did. And then we created visual scripts. How did we do? Right click here, create empty object, and then you will get an empty object, name it visual scripts, and then add a component called script machine. Okay, and you will need to create a new graph. It will ask for a folder, give a folder, and then click on edit graph, and it will ask you to give the variables first. So create these 3 variables: object, button rotate left, and its type is button, and associate the button rotate left in the hierarchy with this. Similarly, button rotate right, its type is button, and associate the button rotate right in the hierarchy with this. And then another variable called model object, its type is game object, and drag the 3D object from the hierarchy onto this field. Okay, and then create this graph. So get variable. So sorry, first on button click event, and then on clicking which button, drag this variable from this to this editor, and then connect these 2 nodes, and then create another node called transform rotate with y value 15. Okay, initially z value 15, and then drag this model object variable onto the graph editor and connect these nodes in this way. So what it means is, this is a function which rotates a particular object by a particular degree. So you need to connect this object to this function, and you need to specify the angle. But this function is called on some event. So this button tells you which event. It is a click event. But which button, on clicking which button, that is this button. Okay, so that is what this graph is saying. So this is for clicking left rotate button, and Just select all these nodes, press Ctrl D or Command D, all those nodes will be copied. Just drag them below and just rename this button rotate left, or instead of button rotate left, select button rotate right. Okay, and here instead of plus 15, select minus 15. That's all. Then you can test your thing. It will rotate the default 3D object. So whenever you want to enable or disable your 3D object, click on the 3D object and check or uncheck this box. If you check this box, the moment you switch on your app, this 3D object will come in your display. If you uncheck it, the 3D object will not come into your display. Only when you show the QR code, the 3D object will come. Okay, so if you want to test it in your simulator, enable this and test in the simulator. Click the play button here. Or if you want to test it in your app with this by default, click it and click the build button. Build, you can go to file, build and run, or the shortcut command B. Okay, fine. But what happens is it will rotate the default object, not the 3D object that is triggered on QR code, but it will rotate the default object. But what we want is, we want the 3D object that is triggered on QR code to be rotated. Okay, so how to do that? We will give it a tag and we will populate this variable. So right now what did we do? Initially we just drag the 3D object onto this variable. So whatever 3D object is existing, it will rotate that 3D object. So we don't want that. We want only that 3D object with the tag to populate this variable. So for that, we created another script. So in the Visual Scripts, we created another script and click on Edit Graph. And here in this, we removed the 3D object. We made this none. Okay, we will let it itself populate this 3D object automatically by looking at its tag. So for that, we created this Visual Script graph. So what does this graph do? On update, that is every frame, it tries to find an object with the tag model object. The moment it finds that particular object, it will populate this variable with that object. So that's what it does. So now, once it populates this variable, the rotate graph will rotate that object. Okay? So that's what we did so far. Fine. So even here, when you run your app, you will see how this is being populated. So let me just quickly show that also. So suppose if I run it again. Okay, now, okay, so this has created this. Now when I click on this, you see that this value will be updated with John Lemon prefab. Okay, where is it? Oh, sorry, here I need to click. It is rotating. Let me rotate script. Let's see, rotate script. Okay. I don't know why it is not showing. Actually, without showing, I mean, this is actually being updated with John Lemon value. So I don't know why it is not showing here. Like earlier it showed, right? So now also it should show. I don't know why it is not showing. We'll see. I'll see if I find it. I'll let you know in the next class. So basically this value is updated with the John Lemon prefab, and that's why these rotation events are triggered on this 3D model. Okay, so that's what is supposed to happen. It's supposed to show. I'll see why it's not showing. Okay, so that's what I wanted to cover today. Fine. In the next class, we will move on to planes, markerless AR. So far we looked at marker based AR, that is you look at a QR code or an image, and only on seeing that QR code or image the 3D object is triggered. But later we will see markerless AR, like when it sees a flat surface, it can be a table or a wall or whatever it is, you can place an object there. Okay, so that's what we'll see in the remaining lectures. Okay, so